You're listening to a mini episode of the Practical Permaculture podcast.
It's just me this week. It's Joe. I caught up with Elise all weekend. We've just come off the back of the event at Permaculture Northern Beaches, which was hosted at New Leaf Nursery at Ingleside. Absolutely amazing event. We had so much fun. So we were guest speakers, along with a host of other amazing speakers as well. So I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Ruth and everyone who delivered an absolutely stellar event. We feel so grateful to be a part of the event and to have met so many amazing people, and we learnt a lot too, which is also just such a huge bonus. So thank you so much for having us there. We're really really grateful. But and also a shout out to Kathy. Thank you so much for coming along and supporting us at the event. It was so great to catch up with another one of our classmates from our PDC and very good friend. So we thoroughly enjoyed catching up with you and your support as well. So today's mini episode, I just wanted to go through a few ways to harvest some rainwater, essentially. Harvest water, really. Some simple ways, so simple, low cost, and efficient ways. So we're not talking about installing, huge rain tanks or underdeck tanks, things like that. Most people know about that, and they're quite a big project. They're quite costly. But I'm just wanting to talk about things that all of us can pretty much do in some way, shape, or form with either things that we already have at home or very low cost items that we can obtain. So the first one of those is it's really simple and really basic. It's putting buckets in the rain. So when it's raining out there, racing out, putting out as many buckets or as many vessels, clean bins, things like that as possible to catch as much rainwater as possible. So then you can either pour that into a main tank or just pop it aside, and then you maybe use it for your indoor plants or pot plants that weren't outside in the rain, or use it however you see fit. Obviously, you want to make sure your buckets are clean if you're going to be using it, not just on your plants, but it's a really easy, simple way of doing it. We often do that. We'll just put whatever we can out, and it's amazing actually when you've got quite a few buckets out there how much you can actually harvest, how much you can collect even with a little bit of rain. So that's one way of doing things. Another one, which takes a little bit of work and ingenuity, and you probably have to buy a few things, is actually diverting your downpipe into the garden. Now, there's a whole heap of different ways you can do that. And the other thing, too, I want to preface is some of this, some councils may require you to either get a permit to do that or you may not be allowed to do that. So, we're all for, sort of bending the rules and everything. However, just make sure that you're not going to cop a fine or get in trouble for doing any of this. But with diverting your downpipe, you can use things like a ball valve and connect that to a flexi garden hose. So that way, if you're getting a huge downpour, you don't necessarily want that all going into your garden because you don't want to be flooding your garden or washing away your plants. So you can close the ball valve up and that will just drain away as it normally would. But if not, if you're getting, like a nice subtle rain and you want to be diverting some of that into your garden, you can just crank the ball valve in the opposite direction, connect that to a flexi hose, and you can take that wherever you want around the garden. So if you've got 2 or 3 days worth of just nice casual soaking rain, well, you might have it for 3 or 4 hours in one spot in the garden or another spot, or you could even then divert that into another tank somewhere as well, depending on how your property's set up and what you have available to you. So there's lots of different things that you can do there. And I find that just to be so effective for a little bit of an outlay to buy the actual ball valve, and using some skills you might have to learn how to cut pipes and reattach pipes and things like that. But I don't see it as a huge risk when it comes down to your downpipe. You're not messing around with sewer pipes or anything like that. So I don't see it as a big deal. And you can always ask someone for help too if you're not someone who's comfortable or confident with being able to do that. Get some help to do that. But it's a really good way of utilizing that rain rather than have it running down the drain and you're looking at that going, well, I could have used that. Is just diverted into the garden. Another really easy and simple way, similar to the buckets and kind of similar to diverting from the downpipe as well, is rain barrels. Now, rain barrels can be anything. They can be, sort of your your blue plastic drums that you see and you can interconnect, or maybe your IBCs. So those big white meter by a meter cubes. You do want to make sure though that they are food grade. Whatever you're putting your water into, you don't want to be putting it into something that's had some nasty chemicals in there. You want to make sure that it's food grade, and it's been well and truly cleaned out. So if you are going to buy some or you're receiving some for free, just do your research and check where they've actually come from. So we've got multiple IBCs around the property, and we've got multiple different connections from the shed and stables and things like that. But we always make sure that they are food grade, and that means that we can either use them for water, we can chop them up and use them as wicking beds. We can do anything with them, so we're not limited then. But rain barrels, yeah, you can either, as I said, divert the downpipe and capture the water that way, and just make sure that you've got an overflow system built in, because you don't want to be, filling this up. You get this huge deluge, you fill up your barrels or your IBCs, and then it's just, spewing out all over the place, and then that's causing more issues. You're going to end up with, erosion and wash away from what's coming out there. So you make sure you set up a reasonable overflow, so that again you can divert any excess away to an area that's suitable for you. The other way to do it is just have it as a standalone. So you can basically just build a little structure, or even something like I don't know the best way I can sort of explain it. It's like an inverted umbrella that people have developed. Even with tarps and just some timbers, or you can have a hard roof, and just diverting that standalone water directly into the tank or the IBC, or whatever that whatever you use, the barrel, huge buckets, bins, whatever you've got available. So that way you're not messing around with your downpipe, you're not, interfering with anything with the home or the structure. You've got this totally standalone, and then, again, you can, use it as you see fit. And another good way too, and again, it costs, it starts to creep up there a little bit when you're looking at that, but interconnecting them. So rather than having, I've got one 200 litre barrel and now I've got this roof space and my barrel fills up in like an hour, what do I do with the rest of it? Well, if you've got a few barrels, you can just interconnect them all along the bottom with some pipe. And then, as you use the water, the level stays the same, because water finds its own level. So it's not like you've got to empty one to use the next, to use the next. And then depending on how much room you've got, will depend on how many that you can interconnect. So that's a really good way of being able to store, a fair amount, like hundreds, sometimes thousands of litres of water with not much space. And the IBCs as well, you can also stack them, because they're designed to be stackable. So again, depending on how much room you've got, like you might have, if you're in an urban area, a pathway down the side of the house that's maybe quite wide, that you go, well, I could actually put an IBC there. And then you go, well, hang on, I've got a 2-story house and that's just a big brick wall there. I could actually go 2 or maybe even 3 high. So again, you want to make sure that you're doing that safely. You want to make sure things are well and truly embedded and tied off. Nothing can fall over. But these are just options that, you may not have thought of, that you go, oh, hang on, I could actually, explore this option. Now, that's one way of collecting water that's coming in, so collecting rainwater. Another way of collecting water is your grey water. So you can actually use buckets again. We do that in summer. So when we have a shower, we just stick a bucket or two in the shower, and it's collecting, the water that's coming out directly from the tap that's, missing us, but also the grey water that's coming off us. So it's got, shampoo, conditioner and soap and dirt and things like that in there. But then after our shower, we just go and take that out to the garden and we pour it on the fruit trees or into the banana circle or wherever we want it. We tend not to put it onto our kitchen garden. We don't put it onto things like our greens and our tomatoes and things like that. We don't want to have that type of water. We don't want grey water to be coming into contact with the food that we directly eat. But things like if we've got a green manure crop that we're growing for the chickens, we call that our salad bar. If we're growing a salad bar for the chickens or the ducks, or onto our fruit trees, it works a treat. And it's amazing that one little bucket in the shower, obviously depending on how long you take a shower and what your water flow and everything's like. But again, you can get a whole bucket of water pretty easily from just having a standard shower. So you think about if you've got 3 or 4 people in the home, how many buckets of water you could be saving to go onto your fruit tree, that now you don't actually have to use potable water to be watering your fruit trees in summer. So it does make a big difference. In winter, not so much, or like now when it's raining. It's been raining in Sydney. I'm in Sydney at the moment because of the event, and it's been flogging down. So there's no point doing it when it's like that. But if you are in a time of dryness and drought, it's a really good way to go. Now, also with water, another way to capture it is just directly in the ground. Now, if you've been around 5 minutes, and if you're a permie, you know all about swales and you know all about berms. But if you're new to this, using a swale, and a swale is simply just a shallow depression in the ground, and it's on contour, so it's level, and it's designed to capture the accumulation of rainwater that might sheet down a hill or even fall directly. Generally, it's on a little bit of a slope, and it's designed to hold that water for a few hours or maybe even a few days and let that slowly sink in and infiltrate into the soil. So as I said, they're generally on contour, which means that they're level across the landscape, or they might have a little bit of a slope. So if you've got, say, quite a large shallow swale, for example, you might have a very, very, very gentle slope. So that allows the water to move along the landscape slowly, soaking in as it goes, but it doesn't really have a potential then for overflowing. So there's lots of different ways you can do swales. You can do nice big long ones on contour. You can do boomerang swales, which are just little individual swales around a tree or two. There's a lot of different ways that you can go about digging them in as well. So you can do some research on that. It just totally depends on your context and what you need. But they're a really good way that they're a once and done. So you put the effort in at the start. They're free because it just takes you and your effort and a shovel, unless you're on a big property, and then that might take you a long time doing it with the shovel. But you might need a piece of kit. You might need a little mini excavator or something like that to help you dig that swale. But generally, if you're going to do it by hand, it's free. It's just you're using your own human power. And like I said, once they're done, they're done. You don't have to think about it. And the trees are generally planted on the high side of the swale, so they benefit from the water that's coming down. It's sitting in that swale, it's soaking in nice and slowly. And of course, if it's on a slope, which most are, it's going to continue to gently move down that slope. So if you've got the trees that are planted up on the top side of the swale, I don't want to say the high side necessarily, it's the low side of the hill, but the high side of the swale, those trees are going to benefit from that moisture, but because they're up on a little bit of a mound, they're not going to drown. They're not going to get wet feet. So they're going to access the moisture, and that moisture is going to continue to move through the ground. So they are a really good thing to do. The other side of that is berms. Now, so a swale, as I said, it's a low depression in the ground. A berm is actually where you build up, so you're creating a mound. Now, berms, generally speaking, are used to divert water away from a particular area or protect an area. But more often than not, they're used to actually divert water into a swale or into an area of the garden. So berms can be anything. So they can just be like an earth mound. So, if you've got some clean fill or something like that, you can create a berm. They can be rock, they can be brick, they can be basically whatever you want it to be that's going to be a suitable sort of structure that's going to act in the same way as an earthen mound to divert the water. You don't want to be using, say, the side of a building or something like that as your berm, because, obviously that's going to cause damage. So you want to make sure that, you're building something very specific. And you want to make sure that you're planning both your swales and your berms so that you're not solving one problem and then causing another. So you really want to think about your landscape, understand the way that water moves through the landscape, understanding the degree of the slope. So, for example, if you've got a really quite a severe slope, then you're not going to have little skinny swales, for example. You might have, really very shallow but very wide swales if it can be done. So that's something that, you have to, again, look at your own context. But a really good way of being able to sink water and get water to the plants. And another really cool way, and this is something that I haven't actually done myself, but I've been looking at it and want to definitely give it a crack, is Olas. Now, Olas are simply earthenware bowls or bulbs or some sort of vessel that holds water. So think terracotta, so it's permeable, and they go into the ground and they essentially act as basically a slow release soak. So you fill them up with water, they're in the ground, and then very slowly over the course of however long it takes for your particular garden, that water seeps out into the landscape. So again, it's not delivering a whole heap of water just plonk, plonk in one spot and then is drying up or dispersing in the wrong way. It's slowly moving through it. So it's giving the earth a chance to actually use that capillary action to move that water throughout the garden. So that's, if you're watching the video, that's totally what happens with, like my fingers. But Olas are great. Now, you can either spend a squazillion dollars on buying very fancy brand name funky Olas, or you can make your own. And I've seen so many people do it now, and it's just two terracotta pots, one on top of the other. So mouths facing, so the openings facing, glue those together. Plug the hole at the bottom that's going to go into the earth, and then you use the hole at the top to actually fill that up. So you pour the water in there, put your hose in there, fill that up, pop a little cap on top so, discourages the mozzies from going in there and laying eggs. And it's as easy as that. And you can have as many of those throughout the garden as you choose. So it's a really easy way, and again, very cost effective, especially if you're picking up maybe from a recycle yard or someone's doing a throw out and they're throwing out some pottery that hasn't been glazed, or some terracotta pots. Anything that's permeable is going to work in the garden for you. So I hope that's given you a couple of ideas on what you can do and how you can actually save some water, harvest some water. Again, just a few quick tips and tricks there. Have a great day, guys. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Permaculture podcast. Jump onto our Facebook group to keep the chat going and to look for any resources that we mentioned on today's show. Look in the show notes.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, then please give us a like, a review, and share with your friends. And if you didn't, then that's okay. We're sure you'll find the right podcast for you.